Welcome to the Common Sense Minute. I'm Chris Apel. In this episode, we're going to talk about State Question 832. I've had people ask me what does State Question 832 really do, how does it affect the minimum wage, and what will that do for Oklahoma? So I thought we'd take a few minutes and let me tell you what 832 actually does. Let's take a quick look here. So if you take a look, State Question 832, it increases Oklahoma's minimum wage from the current $7.25. It removes many of the current exemptions that we have to the minimum wages. It adds an exemption for state employees to minimum wages. It keeps the exemption for some small businesses that we already have. It also repeals Title 40, Section 197.5 of the Oklahoma statutes. And we'll go over all this here in just a moment. Let's take a quick look. So 832, the way it's written, if it passes, currently we have a $7.25 minimum wage. And you can take a quick look there. It shows you that at 40 hours a week, someone making minimum wage would earn $290. In a month, it'd be $1,257. And over a year, if they're a full-time worker, it'd be just a little over $15,000. State Question 832, if it passes, increases that minimum wage from $7.25 to $12 an hour. So January 1st, 2027, minimum wage would increase to that. And as you can see there in the second column over, it tells you that the yearly increase is going to go up 65.52%. And then 40 hours a week, someone would be making $480, a little over $2,000 a month, with $24,000, almost $25,000 a year. In the year 2028, January 1st, the increase for minimum wage would be the $13.50. And you can see how that increase from 27 to 28 will be 12.5%. Overall, from today to 28, it'd be 86%. And you can see that the hourly work week, someone would make $540. In a month, it'd be $23.40. And annually, it'd be a little over $28,000. In 2029, the minimum wage would go to $15. And as you can see, the increase is there, that the hourly wage that someone would make for a 40-hour work week would be $600, $2,600 in a month, and then $31,200 would be your annual salary. In 2030, beginning in 2030, minimum wage would increase each year depending upon the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, or CPIW. 3% is the average over the last 10 years. So I just plugged in 3% so we could see what theoretically might happen. So in 2030, January 1st, minimum wage would go to $15.45. And then quickly we'll look at the rest of the time frame there to 2035. By then, minimum wage would be $17.91, which means weekly, someone would be earning $716, monthly $3,100, and annually a little over $37,000. So what's the CPIW? Now this one's really important because some of the ads out there tell you the CPIW, or Consumer Price Index, is based upon the big cities. Others tell you it's based upon our region. Well, in actuality, the CPIW that is used for this is based upon a national average of people who are hourly wage earners. And they call them CPIW because that's the clerical workers, and it goes across the urban area of the U.S. It takes in about 30% of the wage earners in the U.S. They think that that's what it covers. Now, they only talk to really a few thousand folks, and they check on what they spend for food, for rent, for transportation, things like that. But it's just an average, and they figure out how much does that go up each year. So if we take a quick look here, we'll see that the CPIW is the same thing that's used to increase Social Security cost of living every year, or COLAs. If we look on there, you'll see it covers 30% of the population, and over 10 years, it averages 3.11%, with the lowest being 0.3% in 2016 and the highest 8.7% in 2022. And on top of that, let's take a quick look at what the minimum wage is of surrounding states. And you can see there that Kansas and Texas are just like us, $7.25 an hour currently for a minimum wage. And it goes up to $15.16 in Colorado right now for their minimum wage. There are a few things that this state question does. It removes some current exemptions we have in our Minimum Wage Act. And those exemptions have been there for a long time. Take a look at this and you'll see what what that does. So it'll take out the exemption for farm workers. So currently, if you're a farm worker and you fall in any of those categories, basically if you're employed on a farm, they don't actually have to pay you minimum wage. They can pay you less according to this exemption. Also, there's an exemption currently in there for anyone who's in domestic service at a private home. So if you have a cook, if you have helpers around the house, you don't have to pay them minimum wage. A few other exemptions: if you're a newspaper vendor or carrier, which there's few of those left in Oklahoma. If you're a part-time employee and you're not a permanent part-time employee, so you don't work 25 hours every single week, but there's an exemption right now where you don't have to get paid minimum wage. Anyone who's less than 18 years old and not a high school graduate or a graduate from a vocational training program, there's currently an exemption that says your employer does not have to pay you minimum wage. Same thing, there's an exemption that says anyone less than 22 years of age who's a student, college, vo-tech, high school, wherever it might be, there's an exemption that you do not have to pay them minimum wage. So let's take a quick look. State question 832, as it adds money to the minimum wage, it also adds a new exemption. And the new exemption is for any individual employed by the state of Oklahoma. Currently, the state of Oklahoma has to follow the law and pay minimum wage. But the state question 832 takes that away. It says anyone who's employed by the state of Oklahoma does not have to get paid minimum wage. And here's very, very important. All employees of public school districts, so teachers, paralegals, everyone who works at the school district level, they're not considered state employees. So this new exemption would not affect them. They still would have to follow minimum wage. There's also one other exemption that's kept in there. It's called the small employer exemption. And as you can see there, if you're an employer that has 10 employees or less, or actually less than 10 as the law reads, and you do not bring in more than $100,000 a year, then they don't have to pay minimum wage either. Okay, and the repealing of the law 197.5 of Title 40, it does two things. It repeals a law that says that you have to pay people at least $2. Well, that's long since gone by for most folks. Everybody normally makes far more than that, the minimum wage that is. It also stipulates in there that the state of Oklahoma, if you're an employee of the state of Oklahoma, you're covered by the Oklahoma Minimum Wage Act. That has to be repealed in 832 in order to take the state employees out of that. And the reason the state employees have to be taken out of that is because the legislature is the one who creates budgets for all of the agencies. And by constitutional law, the state has to make that choice. The legislature does. They cannot be tied to an automatic increase like the CPIW or the increases in minimum wage over the next several years. At the same time, it keeps the state's merit system in place so that they can continue being separate from the public. Okay, let's talk about employee benefits. There's always employee benefits. Let's take a quick look at those. You'll see that you'll have higher take-home pay. If you currently make minimum wage, your pay goes up. It gives protection against future inflation. As your pay increases, inflation goes up. After the pay hits $15 an hour, every year thereafter, by law, minimum wage has to increase by whatever the consumer price index goes up. It gives the employee greater employee retention. Employees are happier. They like where they're working. They make more money. They stay there. There's a ripple effect on wages where if I'm starting to make $15 an hour as someone coming right in, then people that have been there, they expect to make more money too. So if you're paying a brand new person $15 an hour, the person that's been there for several years, they should be making 16, 17, 18, whatever the amount might be. It'll help lift their wages as well. And finally on there, there's broader worker coverage, which means the exemptions are taken out so that more people fall under the Minimum Wage Act. Let's also there's a couple more employee benefits. Lower employee turnover, happier employers or happy employees aren't leaving you. So for the employer, that's a benefit. You have higher work productivity. So if I'm a worker and I think I'm getting paid what I'm worth or I'm getting paid more, then I might work harder. Increase in local spending. If every employee is making more money, odds are they're spending it, a lot of it probably locally, restaurants, stores, wherever they might be going out to, they'll be spending more money. Also, it levels the playing field. Larger companies, national companies, might already be paying $15 an hour to start. Well, this, in their mind, for the bigger companies, it levels the playing field so that the smaller companies in town have to pay that same minimum wage so that they can catch up to them. Let's look at some employee drawbacks. Now, these are really important because I think people have to pay attention to the fact that if you force employers to pay more money, the employer may not be making more money or enough money to cover those increases in salary or increase in the minimum wage, so they might have to reduce the hours of an employee. This is just, it might happen at some places. It's a potential, and so we want to put the drawbacks in here. It could be job loss. So, for example, an employer, they may not have enough income coming in to cover raising everybody's salary. Say they're currently paying $8 an hour or $9, whatever the scenario is. Bumping it up might make it too expensive for them to keep all their current employees. Also, if there are increases in someone's pay, then if I'm an employer, I might have to raise my costs, or my cost does go up. I might have to raise my prices. So if I'm a restaurant, my food might have to go up. You might have to pay more coming in so that I can earn more to pay the employees. Some employers I've heard are thinking about decreasing non-wage benefits. So for example, if I'm an employer and I offer health insurance, well, health insurance is expensive. I might have to do away with health insurance for the employees so that I can afford to pay them more. And finally on that list there, government assistance eligibility. If people are making more money, they might drop off of the ability to get government assistance, which theoretically we're hoping a lot of people can do. Okay, let's take a quick look at the employer drawbacks. Obviously, higher labor costs, the wage compression. And what that means is if right now I'm paying $8 an hour for incoming people and someone's been with me for a few years makes 12 or 15, well, once you bring that bottom up, I'm compressing the difference between start pay and my additional pay for people who have been with me. So initially that might compress, and then people who are working for me, they're going to expect their wages to increase and grow. So at first compresses it and then moves it up. For thin margin industries, so say for example, you have a small business or even a large business. If you don't make a huge profit or a large profit, then your margin might be small and you may not be able to afford all the employees because you don't have enough income, enough revenue, enough profit, if you will, to be able to pay more. Reduced ability to hire. Sometimes an employer is looking to hire an additional employee, but they may not be able to pay for an additional employee, so they might have to put that off till later. And then there's permanent inflation increases. Now that for an employer might be bad because it tells me every year when the CPIW comes out, I have to pay more if I'm paying at minimum wage, that is. So anyway, that's a drawback for an employer. Okay, let's take a quick look in closing. Larger businesses with stronger margins, ones that make more money, they'll be able to adapt. Smaller and rural Oklahoma employers face steep challenges. And the reason I say that is some of the smaller areas, they might be paying $10 an hour right now, and it's cheaper to live in some of the small areas, maybe rents less, local stores. It might have cheaper goods or cheaper costs because their expenses are down. That might increase. They might have a challenge paying that to begin with. Let's see. And just for general knowledge, over the last 30 years across our country, 87.5% of all minimum wage measures have passed at the ballot. And one thing that this is really important, I think, that people need to pay attention to, is that this changes Oklahoma statutes. It doesn't change our Constitution. It's Oklahoma statutes. And a statute can be changed by legislatures. It can be changed by initiative petition like this if people vote for it. So although it goes into law January 1st, the legislature has the ability to change what it says. Also, at the bottom there, primary election is Tuesday, June 16th. If you live in like Cleveland County where I live, we have lots of opportunity to vote. We can do early voting Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then obviously on Tuesday. Polls are open from 7 to 7. You can check with your local county for the election board and see where your polling places are and when they're open. And finally, let me show you what it looks like if you get to the ballot, or you get and you see your ballot. You see this lengthy question. You'll have multiple ballots depending upon where you are in the state. You'll have primaries for state offices depending upon Republican, Democrat, Independent, things like that. You'll see right here that the ballot is rather lengthy, but it really says, are you for increasing the minimum wage in the steps we went over or not? And so it's just a real simple yes or no item there. That's it for the state question 832. I hope that's helped you a little bit. I hope you think about how this affects you and the people you know. If you're in an area, if you make minimum wage, obviously this would help increase your pay drastically. Don't forget, minimum wage is not a living wage, because as the numbers we saw at the very beginning, that's not a whole lot of money at minimum wage. If you're working 40 hours a week and you're trying to take care of yourself or your family, that's extremely difficult to do, obviously. So increasing minimum wage would help. Flip side is, if you're a business and your labor costs are high, increasing the labor cost is difficult for a business to take on without having challenges. But anyway, I just hope that everyone takes a look, thinks about how this state question will affect them and their area and their folks they know, and get out Tuesday. It's very important. Get out and vote. State question 832 is on Tuesday, June 16th ballot. Thank you very much.